If you're arguing with somebody who is a massive supporter of AI, you can no longer say there's 6 Terminator movies for a reason. Now you have to say there's 6 Terminator movies and 2 Mission Impossible movies for a reason. Study it in school. This is what we come here for, guys, to learn about the dangers of AI. If you don't believe it, now you will. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning is the supposedly final installment in the Mission Impossible series, the 8th one, and the 8th one starring Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt. And just so you know, this is going to be a spoiler-free review. I am going to have a spoiler-filled review for you guys either this weekend or the beginning of next week. Ethan Hunt and his IMF team continue their search for the terrifying AI known as the Entity, which has infiltrated intelligence networks all over the globe, with the world's governments and a mysterious ghost from Ethan's past on their trail. Joined by new allies and armed with the means to shut down the Entity for good, Hunt is in a race against time to prevent the world as we know it from changing forever. I am really conflicted with my thoughts on The Final Reckoning. This movie satisfied me, confused me, and disappointed me all at the same time. On one hand, it takes a more somber and emotional approach in its tone. It relies less on action and harkens back more to what made the original Mission Impossible TV series and the original film with Tom Cruise really good in the first place. It relies more on tension and suspense. It builds a lot of that. You feel everything is at stake. You feel the end of the world implications, and you don't need the big, bombastic, explosive action scenes to emphasize that. And I appreciate this movie for actually bringing it more down to earth and relying more on tension and harkening back to what made the series in the first place and how this film series actually got started. Of course, you still have Tom Cruise being a cinematic daredevil, dangling from planes and infiltrating submarines like it's a routine Saturday afternoon. I love all that. And I love the aspect that this does bring it back to a more tension-filled Mission Impossible movie. The stunt work here is phenomenal. There's a really good set piece on a submarine that Ethan Hunt has to infiltrate. That thing is very claustrophobic. It is very terror-inducing. Parts of it felt like a horror movie. And they did a really good job making the tension feel so real and so lived in there with how claustrophobic and terrifying being in a sunken submarine with water flowing all over the place could be. And I think that they made it as realistic as possible to emphasize the fact that shit is going down. This is end of the world stuff. Ethan Hunt's life in this submarine is on the line. I felt the danger in that scene, and I felt the danger throughout a lot of the movie. I applaud the movie a lot for doing something completely different than the last few entries have done. A more somber, slower burn of a pace. The story that they were trying to tell or wrap up from this movie, because it is essentially Dead Reckoning Part 2, this part of the story called for it, I think. On the other hand, the first hour of this movie is a complete mess. I've always said that the first 90 minutes or so, maybe 100 minutes of Dead Reckoning are fantastic. But that last hour really drags. It really loses a lot of energy and it loses a lot of momentum. Unfortunately, that loss of momentum carries over into the first hour of Final Reckoning, because the first hour of Final Reckoning is very dull. I don't want to say soulless, but it doesn't have the tension that the last couple of hours of this movie do. It relies more on callbacks and nostalgia to the previous installments of the series. And for me, that was a massive detriment to the film, because it felt like not only was the movie playing catch up with itself, but it was playing catch up with the previous movies in the franchise. It felt like a greatest hits package rolled all into the first hour. And there's a bunch of retcons from previous films. There's even a retcon from the last film, which just came out 2 years ago. And I kept shaking my head at some of these choices. I was like, why are we doing this? Why is this happening right now? There's no consistency now. And I get franchises retcon things all the time. Franchises call back to things all the time. It's totally fine, but Mission Impossible was just so consistent in all of that it never really needed to do any of that. It never really needed to retcon anything. I just feel like that the callbacks to the previous movies are just byproducts of the massive amounts of exposition that you get in this movie, and that's why I feel like the first hour of this movie is playing catch up to not only the movie, but the entire series. It's exposition dump after exposition dump. Every Mission Impossible has exposition, for sure. But here, it's more just like everything's thrown at you all at once. It's one of those things where it feels like you're just trying so hard to retain all the information. And a lot of it is information that you already know because you've seen that information presented in previous Mission Impossible movies. It was way too obvious to see what they could have trimmed down or just completely cut from that first hour, and they should have had the movie begin at a certain point. And I can tell you exactly in my spoiler review where the movie should have begun. And I hate to say it, but I am super, super, super let down by a lot of the action set pieces in this movie. The submarine one, I think, is the standout one. There's also another smaller scaled action sequence in a cabin that is intercut with another fight on a submarine, a different submarine, not the same submarine, that I thought was actually fantastic. That was also another standout one. The biplane one from the trailers and all the other action scenes that are shown in the trailers and that are presented in the movie let me down. The biplane one did not have the intensity, did not have, at least for me, did not have the spark. It did not have the energy. What it felt like for me was Christopher McQuarrie just coming back and being like, well, we got to wrap this shit up. I really don't want to make another one of these, but you guys want me to, so I guess I have to do it. It has what I call the Sam Mendes Spectre syndrome. And what do I mean by the Sam Mendes Spectre syndrome? Well, Sam Mendes directed Skyfall. He wanted to move on from the Bond movies after Skyfall. What ended up happening is they forced Sam Mendes to come back, and you could tell that he did not want to make another James Bond movie when he was making Spectre, because you could tell that he was asleep at the wheel during every single action sequence in that movie. A lot of the action in that movie lacks a lot of spark, explosiveness, energy, momentum. That's how I feel with Christopher McQuarrie directing the action scenes in this movie. Aside from the big claustrophobic, tension-filled submarine set piece, I got that feeling with Christopher McQuarrie in this. I feel like he just wanted to wrap it up, call it a day's work, and go the hell home. There are certain choices with characters that I didn't necessarily agree with, especially early on in the movie. There's a couple of things later on in the movie where I'm just like, wait, what? Why? It's a messy Mission Impossible movie. That's what I will say, but I think if you are a massive fan of these movies, you'll walk out satisfied. Just don't expect major action set pieces. Don't expect a full fast-paced action movie like Dead Reckoning or Fallout or even Rogue Nation, where there's a lot of action and the action really is a byproduct of the story. Once you get past the first hour of this movie, the plot really comes into focus. The first hour is also just setup, but I was like, I thought Dead Reckoning was all set up, but it sets up even more. There's a plot point mentioned in the first hour, and it takes forever to get there. Once you get there, the movie feels like smooth sailing, but even then, I'm still not a big fan of some of the choices it made. The Final Reckoning is a well-made movie. It takes a lot of big swings that I appreciate. It does some things that we haven't seen from Mission Impossible in a while. It's a more tension-filled movie. It's got a more somber tone to it. It's trying to ratchet up the emotions as well as it can, and I think it does a fairly good job at that. But if you're looking for some major action, you're going to be massively disappointed. The first hour is a bore to get through, and once you get through that first hour, the last 2 hours have to feel like payoff. And some of the action in the last 2 hours didn't feel like payoff for me. In terms of what I would give this for a popcorn rating, I would say I would give Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning the IDK. I don't know. This is one that I really have to sit on. I'm leaning towards half bucket of popcorn, maybe 3/4 of a bucket of popcorn. I have no idea. I can't make up my mind. I think it is definitely one of the weakest of the series. In my opinion, I think it's worse than Dead Reckoning. In the last hour of Dead Reckoning didn't really do this movie any favors. In movies like this, you have to acknowledge how well made they are. They're definitely not here to try and just get a dollar out of you. They're definitely trying to put the best product on the screen possible. I don't think that that is the case here. I don't think that they necessarily did that, but I applaud the effort, if you know what I mean. So if you have seen Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, Let me know what you think of it in the comments below. I will leave my link to my website in the description below as well. You guys are the best. Thank you for watching. My name is Alex Madden, and I will see you at the movies somewhere.